part of those kind of scenes.
Right. Next picture. There you go.
And of course, Santa and Mrs. Claus. We have Santa as well as the carolers, ice skaters, and dancers scattered throughout the property. And then back there, you can probably see part of a community scene. We also have 4 or 5 buildings that represent a community.
Now, is this a decoration as well?
This is an older decoration as well, exactly.
You know, I remember riding through a lot younger and seeing some of these, and as we rode through after the ceremony last week, I kept saying, that's an old one, and that's an old one. And I think it's, you know, for your visitors to be familiar with these.
Absolutely.
All right, next picture, Phil.
And again, the front of the Elks National Home in all of its glory.
You know, that may be my favorite picture because I always like the elk as wreath on his neck. Is that the last one, Phil? Oh, one more.
And of course, that's our nativity scene. And that is also very, very old.
Yeah, I thought that was
old.
original. You know, someone told me that, before I talked to you, said that they thought that decorating started up there in August, but you told me it's, what, October?
It's October, just before Halloween, actually.
How long does it take?
Well, a couple of...
I mean, is that, I'm sure it's pretty labor intensive.
It's very labor intensive, and we have 5 people that work in that are our grounds crew and maintenance crew, and we have a couple of painters also that go out and they all chip in to help put that thing together. So I guess the rest of the work at the home gets put aside.
Do any of the residents help?
No, they don't. They used to. We used to have some very artistic residents that would do some of the scenes and things of that nature. No, not today. It's all done inside and outside is done by employees.
Tell me, how do you maintain these older decorations?
Well, when we take them down, we do repaint them.
Every year?
Every year. And if they don't get done when we take them down, then of course we'll repaint them before we put them back up. And we do have storage areas because that used to be a working farm.
Oh.
So we have a couple of barns that we use, and we have a hog house where we stuff, and we have a bus barn and other outbuildings that we store those decorations in.
That was going to be one of my questions. Where in the world do you store these huge, you know, these huge decorations? Now, I've also heard there's a tremendous amount of lights. Do you know the number or an approximate number of lights that are used?
We have over 60,000 lights hanging from the buildings and the trees and the fences. That's in addition, of course, to the other scenery.
You don't have those chains of lights that goes out, they all go out.
You know, there are a few of those
really?
in some of the trees, that's correct, and that's a little dangerous. But we today I went down in the shop, and they were down repairing lights, so we have a few burn out and blow out and like this, so we're constantly, which is daily, checking them out and making sure everything's ready to go. You
know, I lived in Bedford some years ago, and at the time somebody said that new decorations or a new decoration scene is added each year. Is
That's
that
correct.
Still true?
Yes, it is. We put Snoopy out this year.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. And of course another ice skater that was fashioned after, I believe, a relative he has. But that's correct. We also take some of the older ones that are just irreplaceable, that you just can't put them back up again, so to speak. And we do have to replace those with some other kind of scenery. So it's being added to every year.
I was going to ask you if any were retired. And
oh, yes.
Older ones that are retired, that must be difficult to make a decision to toss them.
Well, if it's animated like a moving one, we do our very, very best to put those back in order. But if it's simply a wooden one where it's easy enough just to replace, we just replace and throw it on the burn pile.
Now, some of the decorations, do you put them in the same place every year? I think some of them are.
Some of them are. The nativity scene, of course, is, and the community scene is in the same location. Everything else we can move about because it's just the characters themselves. Yeah.
And you know, I've commented on the one that was animated. Mm-hmm. Do you have any idea how many are animated and how many aren't?
You know, I think there are many. I think there's 5 or 6 animated ones.
they're so lifelike anyway. When I'm thinking about the ones that are animated and the ones that aren't, they just all seem animated because of the faces and and the colors. Who actually does all the decorating? Is it the grounds people or the employees or?
It is the employees. We have 3 maintenance people as well as 2 groundskeepers, 1 part-time groundskeeper, and a couple of painters. They all chip in at the same time and help out. Then we have a director of entertainment who does most of the inside fixing up. And of course we have housekeeping does their fair share. And we do have one resident that does some of the hallways and stuff simply because she just loves doing it.
I think that's wonderful. And one of the things that strikes me, you have residents there, and I'm sure that there are some whose families no longer have families, and this must be really exciting for them to see so many people coming at Christmas.
I imagine it is very exciting. It's also very hectic. Well, there's a lot of people going through there, and they're not used to that many people around at one time, and sometimes I think they're a little amazed.
I can imagine. All right, on your website, I read that in the past, some companies were either contracted to make some of these decorations, or did they volunteer to do it?
Actually, we haven't had any of that since I've been there. But prior to my time, there were companies did that. I would imagine we purchased some, but also a lot were donated. The last thing that was donated to us by the city was a big Santa Claus, and again, I mentioned the Christmas trees already, but still do get donations from time to time, but nothing like the animated ones. Yeah.
Do you have any idea how those larger ones that came in from outside, how they were shipped in by rail or?
It could have been by rail because it's right next to our property. It depends on what location it came from and when it came. But everything is put together there at the home. There would be impossible to ship some of that stuff in a position.
I'm sure. Going back just a little bit, when did the decorating actually begin to be more more just decorated and some lights? Well, I think in the main hall.
Let me tell you where it started from. Basically, it started in 1953. And we had a row of lights along the roof line. And of course we had a sleigh and reindeer out front and a giant Christmas tree inside. By 1955 they started putting more and more decorations out. And by 1965 they put out the nativity scenes and all of the elves and all the lights, and not 60,000 of them, but many lights. And that's when the people really started coming around. Late 50s, mid 60s they were coming from all parts of Virginia, and now they're coming from everywhere.
They are. I mean, I remember when living up there, you'd get in line to go in and look at the and you'd see license plates from Delaware, and I'm sure that people have heard about this, and if they're traveling through at Christmas, that's one place that they want to stop. So the grounds themselves were first opened in '53?
The first decorations were put up then. The grounds have always been open for anybody that wanted to take a tour or anything of that nature. But as far as the Christmas lighting itself, it was about 1955 before they really started coming through.
Favorite decoration
No,
yourself?
I stand up there in my sunroom and look out on all of that, and it's amazing. And you can't have a favorite. I tell you, it's just all of it's wonderful.
It's just, it's so awesome, and it just really blows your mind to see all of that at one time.
If I were to say I had a favorite, it would have to be my wife as an ice skater.
Is her face painted on one of those?
Yes, she is one of them. So.
That's really neat. It's immortalized on an ice skater. One of the things that I really like when we lived there, I enjoyed looking at that elk. He just looks so stately and so regal standing up there with that wreath around his neck, and it was really something. Now the Elks Home, Elks National Home, I want to get that right, obviously does much more than just Christmas lights. And, I'm interested in our audience knowing what all you do.
Well, as far as community work, there's what they call the Grand Lodge, who's